Johnny Con.
Okay guys, so here's the deal. You can probably tell in my voice, or maybe you can't, I don't know. I'm really sick. I've been sick for about 2 weeks now. And I have been wanting to make videos, but because of the way my voice is, I don't want to do the videos that I wanted to do. So I decided instead I would do something that somebody asked me the last time I did a stream, which was, hey, why don't you do a room tour? I don't really want to do a room tour. I kind of wanted to just show my collection, how I display it and all that, and just kind of talk about how I got into collecting. Figured it's something that's easy to do, something that I can always redo in more depth if I want to. But anyway, let's just get started. I figured it would be cool, so I hope you enjoy. So I'm going to start here, and I'm going to try to get enough light in here with my NES collection. The original Nintendo, was my first video game console. It was a hand-me-down from my brother and my parents, and I only had, at the time, I think like 20 games, which was actually, I guess, a lot for a kid, but, you know, looking at how many I have now, a little bit of a smaller number, 20 compared to all of this. But yeah, so I started with the NES and Mario and Zelda and all of the staples, and then a whole bunch of crap like Bad Dudes, Hide Lied, stuff like that. But regardless, I still really love the NES. It's still my favorite console of all time. I really love the graphics of this time because I feel like it was when games finally started being able to represent what they were trying to show on screen, as opposed to like Atari graphics where they were barely legible single color sprites and all that. So that's why the NES is one of my larger collections. And as you can see, we have quite a bit here, and I've made my own little cases for them. I had to have some way to display my carts and still have the labels and just try to protect them. So I made my own box art, kind of imitates the old NES boxes, but with their own thing. And I made the art, printed it out, cut it, did all that, and I'd continue to do that for a lot of my loose cartridge games. I had the NES basically it's from the day I was born. I don't know how else to say it. Yeah, I had an NES as long as I can remember, and it was my only game console for a really, really long time. Next is, of course, the Super Nintendo. I never had a Super Nintendo as a kid. My first Super Nintendo experience was at a neighbor's house, and we used to play a whole bunch of Kirby games on it. I didn't own a Super Nintendo until like the middle of high school, actually. One of my friends said he had one laying around, and he gave it to me, along with a copy of Mega Man X. And the reason that was so important to me was because I had played Mega Man X on the PC when I was younger, and having it on the Super Nintendo was just... I couldn't have asked for a better first Super Nintendo experience of my own. So, not a lot of games here. With the Super Nintendo and really the 16-bit era in general, I don't really have an attachment to it. The games are beautiful, but I tend to find that there's something about the controls in a lot of 16-bit games that I don't like. They often feel like floaty or laggy. I think a big part of it is the controller on the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis. I think that I just haven't found a good one with responsive buttons, maybe. Regardless, the Super Nintendo is really cool. Of course, I have a ton of classic titles here, and something I should mention, you might see some strange titles here, like Tower of Radia, or perhaps Back to the Future, Chrono Trigger, Earthbound, Final Fantasy VI. A lot of these are reproductions. I'm not going to say a lot of them. The expensive ones are reproductions. I have very few expensive video games. I've always been very frugal about my collecting. I always try to find deals. I always try to pay under what it's going for at the time. And if it's a really expensive game that I just want to play, like Earthbound, I'm not going to spend $300 for a cartridge. It's not happening. But I have no problem spending $10, $15 for a reproduction, but I know it's going to work at least for that single playthrough. And honestly, my experience with reproductions has been that they work just as well as a real cartridge, just sometimes the batteries die a little quicker. My N64 collection is an interesting one. So the N64 I also didn't own as a kid, but I had tons of friends who did. We used to play GoldenEye, Smash Brothers, Turok all of the time at my friends' houses. And my first experience with the N64 was actually a tape that I got sent in the mail, showcasing what it was all about. And I remember seeing Super Mario 64 and just like losing my mind. And it was the first time I had ever really seen 3D games. One of my friends when I was growing up in middle school, his sister had a Nintendo 64, and I still have that N64. He gave it to me in middle school, I think. Yeah, it was in middle school when I really first started getting into collecting. He gave me his N64 with Super Mario 64, so both of those are the childhood copies that I used to play on, which I think is just super cool. I'm super glad that I can say that. Of course, like I said, quality over quantity here. So, I don't have a lot of games for it, but the games that I do have are all ones that I really want and I really want to play. So where things get interesting is the GameCube collection here. Now, the GameCube was an interesting situation. I got my first GameCube for $50 at GameStop. It was an interesting time. I had grown up with the PS2, and I kind of started to, miss the games that I traded in to buy my PS2, because when I got the PS2 at launch, I sold my entire NES collection, my entire Game Boy Advance, Game Boy collection, and my entire Sega Genesis collection, including the consoles, to get a PlayStation 2. So I started to miss some of the franchises, like Sonic, that you played on those. And so I got a GameCube, $50, and I got a copy of Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. Now you'll notice I don't have that now because I have the original Dreamcast version that I prefer. But it's an interesting story, because that was my first GameCube game, and the GameCube is a really cool console. It's not one I collect for, especially today. It's super expensive. Most of these games here are just the ones that I absolutely love. Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, of course, Mega Man Network Transmission. The Pokemon RPGs are really good. Sonic Heroes, best version of that game. Soul Calibur 2, you can play as Link. Come on, that's awesome. Tales of Symphonia, one of the best RPGs ever. Wario Land, pretty good little action platformer game. And of course, Zelda the Wind Waker, which I'll be honest, the only reason I still own this game is Zelda the Wind Waker, which is always in my GameCube now because I use it to hack the system and play Game Boy games on it. And of course, Wii and Wii U, I don't really have anything to say about. I have barely touched these platforms, and for me, the waggle controls haven't really aged that well. The Metroid Prime trilogy is a highlight, however, those games play awesome on the Wii. Red Steel 2 is also super cool. And then on my Wii U, I have, Nintendo Land and Super Mario Maker, which I actually think Mario Maker 1 is much better than Mario Maker 2. I was really into collecting for the Switch when it first came out, and in the last couple of years, I've really lost interest in it. As its ports have started to only run at 20 frames a second, it's an aged platform at this point. It was when it released, really. And I just lost interest in collecting for it. My tiny Famicom collection here, again, quality over quantity, and my little Gengar Game Boy toy. My Disk System collection, which is just 3D Hot Rally and I Senshi Nickel. Super Famicom, I have pretty much every Rockman game that came out on it. I don't own Mega Man 7 on the Super Nintendo. It's much cheaper to buy these games on the Super Nintendo, so I have Rockman 7, Rockman Forte, and Rockman X 2 and 3. And of course, the real Super Game Boy, the one that runs games right. Another highlight of my collection, one of my personal favorite things to collect for is Game Boy. Let me move the light here a little bit. Maybe that'll make things a little easier to see. So again, this is one of those projects that I did where I put the games in cases. These are cassette case tapes, and I make the art for them and cut it out, put the carts in there. Really nice way to display your games. I really like just, this looks awesome. And I'll try to open one for you here. You can see it's pretty simple. It's just a cassette case. I cut out the little holder things inside. I put a piece of foam with double-sided tape in the artwork, and then there you go. You've got your little cases. Of course, I have Game Boy Advance as well. Not as large of a collection, but still, I really like the games that I do own on it. My DS and 3DS collection is small. During this period of mobile gaming, I was more into the PSP. Still, the games I have here are ones that, I feel are worth playing. Diddy Kong Racing, of course, all kinds of Mega Man, Pokemon, and Super Mario 3D Land on the 3DS. I think this is one of the best Mario games I've ever played. My Genesis collection is basically a recreation of the Genesis games I played as a kid. Aladdin, The Jungle Book, Landstalker, Mortal Kombat 2, a reproduction copy of Pulse Man, Rocket Knight Adventures. You hear more people talk about that nowadays. Back in the day, it was something people didn't really pay attention to, but that's a great kind of Sonic Mega Man hybrid clone game. It's really fun. Of course, we have all the Sonic games, including the spin-offs, Vector Man 1 and 2, and one of my personal favorites, X-Men. The Dreamcast collection is small, but tons of good stuff here. Mach and X, Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, Jet Grind radio or Jet Set radio. In there you'll see a little tiny case. That's a additional copy of Marvel vs. Capcom, and then I have Marvel vs. Capcom in a case, and Marvel vs. Capcom 2 in a case that I made. You can tell the font isn't very good on it, but you know, whatever, looks good on the shelf. A couple of things down here I haven't made cases for yet. My copy, hold on. This is Sylphid, I can't remember. I have Cobra Command on the Sega CD, Sonic CD, I have Sylphid, and I believe I have Soul Feast currently in my Sega CD. Still need to make cases for Soul Feast and Sylphid. Xbox, not really a platform I collect for. I don't even have my original Xbox right now. I need to get a new one. Mine bricked. So I sold it to somebody who wanted to fix it up, and I needed a new one anyway because I prefer the black ones. I actually had the little green Mountain, was it Mountain Dew or Halo? I can't remember. I had a special edition original Xbox, and I prefer to have black consoles. So I sold it when it bricked, and hopefully it's in a good home now. The guy said he was going to fix it up. Blanks, Sega GT / Jet Set Radio Future. Panzer Dragoon is awesome. Phantom Dust is awesome. Psychonauts is awesome. I'm going to make some enemies here. I do not like Halo. You can see I have all of the Halo games here that I could possibly play on the Xbox and Xbox 360. A couple of years ago, probably about 3 years ago, I played through the entire series back to back, and I was not impressed. You know, people say like, oh, these games define shooters. They didn't for me. For me, you know, Doom was the first shooter I played, and that one holds up. I don't think really any of the Halo games hold up. I have to say, the Halo games that I liked the most were ODST and Halo 4, or like the two that I thought were good, which apparently a lot of people hate for. I did like Halo Wars though. I really, really love RTS games. A couple more random Xbox games I've picked up over the years that I've never really played. Not an Xbox 360 guy. Do have a copy of Psychonauts 2, Recore, and Sunset Overdrive for the Xbox One. Not a system I collect for. Pretty much only get games I can only play there. PS1 is a console that I had a lot of experiences with as a kid. That same friend that gave me the N64, well, he had the PlayStation 1. So a lot of these games are games that I played at his house and picked up later on my own, like of course Crash Bandicoot, Crash Team Racing, Crash Bash. The Final Fantasies are a personal touch. We did used to play Frogger all the time. Mega Man 8 was a personal one, of course, all of the Mega Man X games. Mega Man Legends, we're working on videos on that now, that whole series. Before anyone asks, yes, this is legit. I bought it right before prices on it really skyrocketed. For, I think I paid like $75. And in case you were wondering, yes, I do have the demo disc in here too. This game is ridiculously expensive now, and I have to be honest, it's not worth the price people ask for it. It's a great game, but no game is worth that much money. Parasite Eve, Space Invaders, Spyro, you know, the good stuff. Now, I've ignored PS2 for a long time. For a long time, the PS2 and the PS3 era was boring to me, and I think that's because since I grew up with it and I played it so much, when I got into all of this other stuff, you know, the PS2 lost a little bit of its grab to me, but, you know, I still have most of my childhood collection here and a whole bunch of stuff that I rented and now own. You know, this is kind of the pride of my collection today. I have a lot of really cool stuff in here that means a lot to me. Just off the top of my head, looking through it now, I remember loving Dark Cloud, of course the Dot Hack games. I still need to get a copy of Quarantine. That'll happen someday. You know, Final Fantasy X, the Jack trilogy, of course Kingdom Hearts, Clono 2, Lunatia's Veil, Mega Man X7, I'm just kidding, that game sucks. Metal Gear Solid saw its golden age in this era. The Nightmare Before Christmas game is actually really cool. Okage Shadow King, awesome Tim Burton-y RPG. You know, Persona, some of my personal favorites. Ratchet and Clank, I absolutely love this series. Insomniac is my favorite developer. Some weird platformers too, like Scalar and Vex. My favorite RPG probably of all time, Tales of the Abyss. Tales of Legendia, not as good, but still an awesome game. PS3 collection, I feel, is a little unique too. I've got the crappy version of Bayonetta, Brutal Legend, awesome game. What's some other stuff here? Cross Edge is really cool. Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas, games that I probably spent the most time in my life in. I think If you added up all the time I played Fallout 3 in New Vegas, it'd probably be close to like 2,000 hours at this point. It's ridiculous, but I love those games and I love that world. Final Fantasy 13, Folklore, you know, Haze, the best PS3 game. Little Big Planet and the Game of the Year edition. Metal Gear Solid HD, Metal Gear Solid 4, Mirror's Edge, more Ratchet and Clank, Resistance, which was also made by Insomniac, and God, I spent so much time playing the co-op mode in Resistance 2. I wish they would bring that back. Rock Band, the games that taught me how to sing. Vanquish, a really unique action game. 3D Dot Game Heroes, awesome Zelda clone. Moving on to PS4. This was a weird era for me because I feel like half of my PS4 collection is just remakes, remasters, HD collections. You see a lot of those. BioShock, Borderlands, Bloodborne, God, that game needs a port. Crash Team Nitro fueled, Dark Souls. You see what I mean? How like a lot of them kind of feel like remakes, reboots, remasters, Doom. You know, Kingdom Hearts, you know, remade. And I think at one point I also owned those on PS3. Phantom Pain, really good game. I still haven't finished it. Nier Automata, One Step from Eden, really cool one. Tales of Berseria and Vesperia, I love. And this Wipeout HD collection here is really good if you're into racing games and futuristic games. You got to check that one out. Moving on to the PS5 collection. Pretty big considering, you know, the console hasn't been out, you know. Again, I'm picky about my games, but even so, the games I have are ones that I really love. And something I was noting last time I was looking at it, a lot of my PS5 games start with S. Very strange. Atomic Heart was kind of a letdown. Control is probably my favorite game I've played in the last 10 years. I haven't played Death's Door yet. Demon's Souls was a game I spent a lot of time on at launch. Final Fantasy VII Remake, need to pick up the part 2 to that. Loved Final Fantasy 16. Love Hades. Helldivers 2 is awesome. Need for Speed Unbound, awesome. Haven't played Persona 3 Reload yet. Just finished Persona 5 a couple months ago. Loved that one. Rift Apart, awesome game. Returnal, awesome game. Sackboy's Big Adventure, awesome game. Sonic Frontiers, haven't finished it yet, but return of good Sonic games, so can't complain about that. The Marvel Spider-Man games, super awesome. Jedi Survivor, haven't finished yet. Stellar Blade, Street Fighter, System Shock, all games I'm currently playing. Street Fighter 6 I've been playing on and off since launch, and I'm really excited for Bison and Mai, and I'm really hoping that with the inclusion of characters from other franchises, maybe soon we'll get one of my favorite characters, Morgan Ansland. You guys have seen the PSP collection video, so I'm not going to go over all this. I don't think there's anything new in here. If there is, it's only like 1 or 2 titles. You guys have seen this. You guys can watch that video. But the PSP is one of my favorite things to collect for. And we'll look at those consoles again after this is all over. Vita collection is growing very slowly because these games are expensive. There's a Switch controller though. And yeah, this is my, my Mega Man Legends 2 poster. Over here I also have a Mega Man Legends 1 poster. Mega Man 0 poster, Mega Man X poster, Mega Man Battle Network poster. The closest thing I'll ever get to owning a Mega Man Legends 3 is just this poster. Another Mega Man Battle Network poster. Mega Man 8 poster. One of my favorite Mega Man games. You guys know I have a lot of Game Boys. I like to mod them, repair them, whatever. Of course, I also have DS's, 3DS's, and so on. There's the Virtual Boy one looking just as good as it did in that last little video. Of course, the PSPs, and gosh, these things, all of this needs to be dusted, but these things really need to be dusted. But, yep, there are the PSPs from the PSP collection video, including this, whoops, including Hatsune Miku. This one is still one of my favorites. This is like a little retro table. Really what I use it for is to put controllers on, have some extra consoles on here, my CRT TV, and just like batteries, cases, extra parts or whatever, you know, things I might need if I like travel. I put the controllers up here that I tend to use the most, or I try to have one for all the consoles that I, you know, have quote unquote hooked up. There's not enough space on the table though, but still, you know, I keep the controllers I like to use up here at least. This is, of course, my CRT TV, which you guys have seen me talk about these things plenty. This is my 14AF series. This is running through RF right now, so it doesn't look super great, but you probably can't tell. It's running the Famicom right now. I haven't modded it, so that's why it's RF, and, you know, looks awesome for what it is. I mean, I love my Famicom, so, you know, I got a nice little CRT here, and this thing has AV, component, composite, RF, and S-Video. So it's got everything I need to play my retro games on. That's why I keep it in the main game room. We got the little Super Famicom down here too. If you look in here, you will see boxes, video game boxes, console boxes, maybe little slip covers, just literally all kinds of boxes. Things that I've collected over the years. Whoops. Things that I've collected over the years. You know, can't get rid of the boxes. They just look cool on display. I don't have any other excuses. So this is the computer, which I'll try to get a better angle of. This is the laptop that I kind of use to edit along with my desktop PC. This is the one that I use to capture video game footage now. You can see my drinks here, my controller. There's my webcam and my mic that I use for streaming and capturing audio sometimes. Also this table over here where I keep remotes and the Wii U gamepad and the Cepacol and Chloroseptic that are the only thing getting me through this video. This is the TV, the Vizio TV, currently running Earthbound? Yeah, Earthbound on the RetroTink 4K. This little thing, super cool. Very, very useful. Glad to have it for capturing video. You can see the Steam Deck there. I use it as a portable emulation device. I rarely hook it up to the TV, but it is great for emulation. I have backed up pretty much that entire collection over there onto this thing, and it's great for on-the-go gameplay. My reshelled PS1, my PS2 Slim, PS3 Slim. There is the PlayStation Vita TV and my Elgato 4K capture card. And man, I need to dust, I'm sorry. PS4 Pro, PS5, as you can tell, all blacked out. Blacked out RGB NES, running it with the HD Retrovision component cables, which also work on the reshelled Super Nintendo. Soon those same cables will work on the N64 once I get the proper parts in to mod that. The black GameCube, which has also been modded, mostly just to play Game Boy Advance games without lag and sharper visuals than the standard Game Boy player software offers. I have my Wii and my Wii U, which rarely get touched, and over here in the corner on the side is my Switch with some custom Joy-Cons there to kind of give you a little bit better grip. It is an OLED Switch. Sega and Sega CD, reshelled Sega Dreamcast, Xbox 360, Xbox One, all that stuff. So let's talk about these consoles. So PS1, right, I pretty much grew up with that at a friend's house. I played it a lot, but again, at the time, what I owned was the original Nintendo and a Sega Genesis when I was a kid. That was all I had. So, you know, I didn't own a PS1 and I couldn't play PS1 games at home until the PlayStation 2 launched. And I got the fat PS2 model day one. I bought it with birthday money and traded in the rest of my collection to make up the difference. And what is the first game I bought on my PS2? Mega Man 8, a PS1 game. I was not a smart child, but you know, the PS2 was my gaming experience from, you know, pretty much all of my childhood up until much, much later with the PS3. So PS2 was very special to me because it was my first real 3D gaming experience. I remember pining after PS3 for so long after seeing Resistance and knowing that all of my favorite franchises were going to continue onto it. I begged everybody in my family for a PS3. My parents were over buying me video game consoles at this point. I don't even remember how I managed to afford it, but one day I finally had saved up enough money to get a PS3. And I remember my brother taking me to a military base, because he was in the military, so that I could buy it for a little cheaper with no tax. And I bought it with Ratchet & Clank Future, Tools of Destruction, and Metal Gear Solid 4. And that was one of the best days of my life. PS4 I got on launch, and I very specifically remember the launch of this console and how addicted I was to Warframe. PS5, I think we can all maybe sort of relate to the situation we were in when the PS5 launched with COVID and all that stuff being a thing. You know, that was not a fun time, but I remember when my PS5 launched, I forgot about all of that. Man, Astro's Playroom, that game is awesome, and I'm so glad that there's new content for me to go try. I might do that after this video. And I'm really excited that it's getting its own game, its own sequel. PS5 so far for me has actually been a really fun console generation. A lot of people are saying, there's no games this console generation. I do not agree with that. There are so many great games that I have a hard time even keeping up and playing the ones I want to. You guys have heard my NES story. You've heard my Super Nintendo story. You've heard my N64 story. You've heard my GameCube story. The GameCube I bought for $50 sometime after I got my PS2, pretty much exclusively to play Sonic Adventure Battle 2. Ended up discovering Tales of the series and Tales of Symphonia on this, which is one of my favorite RPGs to this day. The Wii, my black Wii here, and the Wii U also, interestingly. I bought the Wii as a graduation gift to myself in 2010. Late adopter. But you know, I wanted one, and I wanted a black one, so that was my graduation gift to myself. I very specifically remember. The Wii U, this is not my original Wii U. I sold that to a friend. I picked this one up later, but I remember the Wii U was also something that I bought on a whim. I was just in the store one day, and I was like, man, I really want to play Mario Kart, and that's how I ended up with the Wii U. It's too hard to get into the Switch corner there right now, and my throat is really starting to give out on me now. There's the box for my original... It's back there, you can kind of see. I think that's the box for the OLED. But my original Switch box is back there. I traded it in for the Switch OLED, but I very, very much remember the Switch launch. And I remember the only game I had pre-ordered for it at the time was the Zelda game. And I did not like Breath of the Wild when I first played it. It was about a week later that I finally sat down and gave it another try that I realized it was actually a really special game, and ended up getting addicted to it and playing that game all the time. You're not going to believe this, but the game that I loved oh so much was Bomberman R. Super Bomberman R. That's the game that I spent the first week on the Switch playing. And I still think it's a great game. So the Sega Genesis, I never owned a CD as a kid, but the Sega Genesis I did, and the only games we really had for it was a hockey game, Sonic 2, and Mortal Kombat 2. And of course the one I played most was Sonic 2. My brother kept this one in his room, so I didn't get to play the Sega Genesis that much. I was stuck with the Nintendo that he'd, given to me. But I would sneak in and play the Genesis sometimes and have so many memories with this console. Dreamcast, I didn't own one until... God, I was probably like 16 or 17. I found one at I believe it was a thrift store with Jet Set Radio Future. And yeah, this console is awesome. Definitely the best way to play a lot of fighting games, specifically Marvel vs. Capcom and the sequel. Excellent on the Dreamcast. And as I kind of, told you guys, I'm not a big Xbox fan. But I have the 360 here and the Xbox One. These were both found at thrift stores for super cheap, and that's the only reason that I own them. The Xbox One, I actually bought 2 of these on the same day at the same store for $40. I was told they were broken and did not work. I came home and plugged them in, and besides being dirty, they worked perfectly. I cleaned them up, and the other one I sold to somebody for $80 and kept this one, so I made a profit. I made $40 buying this Xbox One. And I know I mentioned, I traded in my Game Boy and my Game Boy Advance collection to get a PS2. Yeah, I did grow up with a Game Boy. The Game Boy Pocket was my first handheld console. It was a red one, and the game I got with that was Pac-Man. A week later, I think I bought Super Mario Land, and it just spiraled out of control from there. The PSP was the last, and this is my original PSP, by the way. This was my last console that my parents bought for me. And I had to trade in some games to get them to do that. I remember I had to trade in part of my Game Boy Advance collection for Christmas to get them to give me the money to buy a PSP 1000. And I remember I got it with Mega Man Powered Up and Metal Gear Solid Portable Ops, which are still some of my favorite games on the platform. My parents after that said, games are too expensive, we're not buying you anymore, and well, you can see what that prevented, right? Never owned a Vita until a few years ago. It's a cool console, but I still prefer the PSP. I almost forgot to show you the ridiculous bin of controllers that I have as well. And all of the cables for the consoles over there. I keep them organized. I don't keep them plugged in all the time because that would be very dangerous. This is like the office / workshop / editing desk. This place is a mess right now. I have so many projects going on. I'm sorry. But I do keep some stuff in here for when I'm working on videos. My twin Famicom, an extra GameCube, an extra Super Famicom, my original fat PS2, the beloved Sony Trinitron, which I'm working on now because the flyback has started whining and driving me absolutely insane. I've got my modded Marvel vs. Capcom cabinet in the corner over here. You guys have probably seen the video on that. It has been upgraded since then. We now have a door on it with cool lights, and inside we have a full-on speaker system to make this thing sound absolutely booming in the audio department. So you can kind of see on the floor here right now, I've recently been cleaning things, taking things apart and repairing them, finding extra things I don't need, wrapping them up, selling them, whatever. Here's the Nintendo. Remember the Nintendo that we fixed in that video? Fun fact, it's broken. It's not really broken, and it's not my fault. It turns out the NES RGB board that we used, they're known for having faults in the latest run. And I was playing this thing one day, and the audio slowly started fading out, and then it went out completely. Turns out there's a little teeny tiny chip, like the size of an ant's dick, that burned out and needs to be replaced. So I've ordered the replacement chip. Hopefully Joe's gonna be able to help me get it on there. If not, we're gonna have to do a whole new RGB board install on it, which really sucks. Some extra Game Boy shells from mod jobs that I'm trying to sell. This is my amp, which is connected to my pedal board, which is downsized. I used to own a really nice Vox amp and cabinet and a huge pedal board. Stopped being a musician a couple years ago and decided it was time to size down. This is fine for me. This Boss Katana amp actually sounds a lot better than you would expect. So this is like a bunch of parts. Game Boy parts, screens, buttons, shells, ribbon cables, all kinds of stuff. PSP parts as well. There's more in this little thing up here. This is kind of like a testing station slash a relaxation station, although right now, as I said, it's very dirty. This is a Game Boy Advance I'm trying to turn into a GameCube controller. That's my Retron 1 that I'm using to test any NES games when I get them. Also use it to capture footage with that flash cart down there sometimes. My favorite little CRT here, my Sansui combo unit. You may have noticed this thing. This is a TurboGrafx 16 that I just took apart and cleaned. I know you're saying, you cleaned that? Yeah, it was a lot worse before, and it really doesn't look too great on camera, I'll admit, but it looks much nicer in person. It's just the way this plastic kind of fades. It looks like that over time. Honestly, I don't know why I'm showing you the desk. It's a mess right now, but, you know, I have 2 monitors, another cup, a Coca-Cola that I should probably throw that bottle away for, a giant Hershey's Cookies and Cream bar. That's my favorite candy. And, you know, my amiibos and all that, and some posters. Currently the only guitar that I own. I don't really play as much as I used to back in the day, but I still like to jam sometimes, so I picked up this Epiphone. I sold off all my really expensive guitars because they're just taking up space, and you know, to me this Epiphone sounds just as good as the Fender Jaguars I've owned, the Tornados I've owned, the Gibsons I've owned, the LTDs I've owned. This thing sounds great to me, so why hold on to a bunch of guitars? Another little display here. We have the custom NES, my Chemical Romance Pine box, Guitar Hero stuff, mostly Mega Man stuff. Another little tiny CRT, and just, you know, cool little display here. There's me in the reflection, something I've been trying to avoid this whole time. And so I guess really the last thing that I wanted to talk about is kind of how I got into like actually collecting video games and video game memorabilia. To be honest, I always loved video games. I already had a collection, I just didn't realize I was collecting, you know, at the time. When YouTube first became a thing, and I think like 2004, 2005, I was an early adopter, so to speak. I had an old YouTube channel. It was called MCR Obsessor 003, and that's an incredibly embarrassing username. But back then I had a little bit of a following. I was close to 1,000 subscribers, which back then was a big deal. The videos were super ancient and archaic, and it was just me sitting in front of the camera talking about video games and what I had found, and I didn't realize that I was collecting video games at the time. I was very inspired by channels like Pete Dorr, Happy Console Gamer, Gamester81, early OG YouTube retro gaming channels. And I just started doing what they talked about, you know. Hey, I go to flea markets, I go to yard sales, I go to, you know, thrift shops. That's what I started doing, and anytime I saw a game, I would buy it. Eventually my collection got really big and it was full of crap I didn't want. So I would eventually sell all of that off and only keep the things that I wanted. And then over the years, I've rebuilt my collection into things I actually like. So as ridiculous as it may sound, these are all games that I have a reason for keeping them and wanting them and intend to play them and do play them. These don't just sit on the shelf. Keeping this shelf organized is actually a pain in the ass, because I constantly am playing different games and different consoles, different systems, different ways to experience the games. So that's how I got into it. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was, oh, I like video games. I'm going to buy video games and play video games. And, that channel, I eventually deleted the channel because I was embarrassed by it. I've had a couple of YouTube channels since then that I tried different things on until I finally landed on JohnnyCom and just decided that this was going to be a channel where I could kind of do whatever I wanted related to gaming or other things. And I might branch out in the future, but, that's really how it starts. You find something you love and you stick with it, and you may invest in it, and you truly love it and appreciate it. To me, everything about video games and consoles is art. Somebody has to design the way they look, the packaging for them, the artwork in the game. Somebody has to write the music. Somebody has to write the story. Video games are the sum total of all entertainment media, in my opinion. So that's why I love video games so much and why I collect them. I look at this as like a museum or a curated piece of my soul, I really think that if somebody was to come in here and they didn't know me and they knew about video games, they would be able to look through my collection and get an idea of who I am, what I loved. That's what video games are to me. It's a part of me that I love, kind of like people love movies or people love art displays. That's what video games are to me. It's an art form. This collection that I've built up over the years is something that I think people can identify with as, being a little part of you that explains, where you came from, what you're into, what you were into, what you may be into in the future, what kind of person you are. It may have shaped who you are, Mega Man, Kingdom Hearts, Ratchet and Clank have all shaped parts of my personality that I'm really proud of, I truly feel like they've made me a better or funnier person just for enjoying them. Games like Life is Strange, they're very emotional, pieces of art for me. Wow, that's shaky. The point being, this is an art form to me, and that's why I collect, and it's why I will continue to collect. I hope this video was something you guys could enjoy. It was easy to make. My voice is killing me, and I've probably started to sound more and more deep and raspy as it's gone on. But I hope you guys can appreciate it. I'm going to try to get back to videos soon once my throat, stops being in pain. I have a dime-sized canker sore in the back of my throat right now from all the sickness that I've gone through, which is really what's holding me back right now. The only way that I can talk is by abusing Cepacol and chloroseptic spray. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.